Hello there, I'm K-Ball, and welcome to Human Skills, where I interview tech industry leaders about all the non-technical skills that go into success in the tech industry. How often have you had a long conversation about what to build, come away with newfound clarity, gone off and built it, and then come back and discovered that what you understood wasn't at all what the other person had intended? In Ben Lindahl's 16 years as an engineer at Google, he became known for creating spreadsheets and docs, careful, tangible artifacts that captured the agreements about what they were trying to build and made sure everyone was in alignment about what truly was being agreed upon. In this interview, we cover communication as a two-sided process, why empathy is important and how to build it, how to get good at meetings so that you don't have to have as many of them, and much more. I'm here with Ben Lindahl, a friend of mine who was at Google for many, many years. And
Hello.
actually, I think that would be a good place, an interesting place for us to start, which
hmm
is sort of your experience and what led you to be interested in this topic of human skills and how they apply to engineering.
Uh, well, uh, I'm guessing you know the joke about how you tell an extroverted engineer they're looking at your shoes.
Yes.
So, so I would say a part of it is I'm interested in it because I think it's an area that a lot of engineers are uncomfortable with, and so making other people feel comfortable is really critical to creating a and fostering a good work environment, and to mentoring people and demonstrating empathy to
Mm-hmm.
people. It's just really important to me, but it's also really important to like a work environment to be able to do that. And so that's a part of where it came from. I was actually also a communication rhetoric major in
Oh.
college, so I've always been interested in communication
Mm-hmm.
and it being a two-party system, and communication is as much about what is received as about what is sent. And that as well is something that's just really interesting from a theoretical perspective for me. But in general, I just think it's so easy to misunderstand or to not be able um, to not be able to be clear with what's in people's heads. And to me, the number one most important thing is to have the same baseline with the people you're working with, and to be able to know that when I'm talking about something, you think I'm talking about the same thing. It saves a lot of time, but more importantly, it creates a degree of trust between us. That you know that if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, and it also allows us to have empathy for each other because we actually understand kind of what each other's mental models are.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good stuff in there that I'd love to dig into. Actually, can we start with the phrase communication is as much about what is received as what is sent? I love that. Can you kind of dive a little deeper on what you mean by that and kind of how you approach making sure that you understand what is being received?
Yeah. So communication is only as communication really is about being able to get ideas across to the other party, uh, whether it's mass communication or it is one-to-one communication, whether it is technological communication like a radio, or it is individual one-on-one in-person communication. No matter what kind of communication it is, the most important thing is that you have a clear understanding, or that the receiver has a clear understanding of what the sender is saying. There's a in radio you can get static, and if you're in person, you can still get certain amounts of static. You can get certain amounts of noise, or you could just be totally interpreting things differently than what the person intended to say. And so I think it's really important to be aware that the person you are talking to doesn't have the same ideas and preconceived ideas in their head as you have, and they also are trying to figure out what you're saying as you're going along. And so I do try to get feedback from them. There's a few ways. For instance, asking them to repeat back to me what I was saying to them, or what they think I was saying to them, or asking them specifics about how they think something could be handled. But basically, being able to make sure that it's a bidirectional communication, making sure that you're able to have feedback, basically, when you're communicating with the person. And it's also, I think, about developing a rapport and being able to express the empathy. I think that we communicate so much better when we are not having to be constantly vigilant against, and we're able to be empathetic toward the other person, and we can trust that the other person is empathetic toward us.
Yeah. So I love some of the tactics you shared there, particularly around checking in as you're speaking with someone and saying, "Hey, can you say back to me what I just said? Is that making sense?" Things like that. What do you do as a listener to make sure that you're actually receiving what someone else is trying to send?
So body language can be really useful, and making sure that you're giving off the body language that demonstrates both body language and facial expression that demonstrates how you are receiving it. So if I give you a quizzical look, like I don't know, if I give you a look that says I'm confused, you might stop halfway through and then be able to clarify with me what it was that you meant. Whereas if I'm nodding along and when you're talking, you can basically make the assumption that at least I think I understand what you're saying. So I think as a listener, I try to be aware of my body language. I also try to make sure that people know that I am paying attention to them. My son Leo, when he does presentations at school, they have on the rubric that he has eye contact. And the reason is because people are going to pay attention to you if they feel like you are connecting with them, and eye contact is a part of that. Some eye contact and not too much. If you maintain eye contact for too long, you can look like a sociopath. But some amount of being able to connect with the other person, and also I think. As the receiver of communication, as the person who is being talked to, I think it's just as important for me to express empathy for the other person as it is when I'm the sender of information. Because if they are talking to me, they're going to be expressing things through their vocal intonations. They're going to be expressing things through their body language, or just the words that they're saying. It's going to be really important that I react appropriately in those cases, and that I react in a way that I am sending them back the message that I want to send to them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any examples that you can share? Because I think one of the challenges here is we can talk about communication, we can talk about empathy, and sometimes it's not always clear, how does that apply to my engineering work? Right? How does that apply to what I'm doing day to day? It sounds good in theory. It's part of being a good coworker or what have you, but how does that help me get my job done? Do you have any particular examples you can share where this was key to getting the job done?
At Google, I think I was known for creating spreadsheets, and second to that, I was known for creating docs, and being able to make sure, and this gets out of verbal communication into written communication, but being able to make sure that we have the same model of what the project is, what we're trying to accomplish. A lot of the time, the project can't even start until you've done that. You can't really start the project until you ensure that you're on the same page and you have the same model of how things would work, how things are broken up, or as I had in a meeting that I was just in earlier today, what are the really important questions to answer? I find that sometimes you get 55 minutes into an hour-long meeting, and then you only then realize what the questions were that you were supposed to answer in the meeting, and then you have to have another meeting to follow up on that. So I think it is really important to know what are the areas that you do need to agree on, and then to come up with mechanisms, whether it is meetings or in person or it is docs or spreadsheets, come up with mechanisms to write those things, or to express those things in a way that everybody says, yes, I agree with that, or no, this is where I disagree.
Yeah, you have to get good at meetings so you don't have to have as many meetings.
Yes. Yeah.
That's funny. You talked about getting on the same baseline and making sure you all have the same understanding. What are Are there any particular tactics you use to kind of set that baseline and develop it on a team? And I actually think your experience being on a very, like being in one place for a really long time, you probably have a different experience with setting those sort of shared understandings than someone who's only been a place, a couple years at a time. So how did you approach that?
Well, so some of it depends on how mature the organization is. When I was working on search over at Google, it's a very mature organization. There's a certain structure that you have in your documents that you follow the same structure, or you have one of like 7 types of docs that you will create. And then that sets the expectation going into the doc about what it is that the intent of the doc is, how it's going to be structured within that doc, and things like that. I'm a huge fan of bulleted lists because it both allows you to separate things that are separate, but it also allows you to draw parallels between things, and then ideally it tells the person you have to be explicit about, is this the complete list that I think we have, or are there other things that we will have to add later? And if you say it's the complete list, then what you're doing is inviting them to say, actually, no, there's this other thing that you didn't talk about there. And so really making sure that you are clear about how you are breaking things down in the doc. That is something that was really important. Or in the spreadsheet. I really liked spreadsheets for that reason, because you can go into it and get to the level of granularity in the spreadsheet where you no longer feel like you need to continue to break things down. I also really like diagrams. I like to use a program called Lucid Chart, which is a really convenient diagramming tool, flowcharting tool, and that allows you to have certain actions that you just know where to put your mouse, and then drag something. You can create a diagram really quickly. I find that a lot of the time, even if I'm having a conversation in person or on video chat, I can sometimes go in and I'll create a diagram because I want to make sure we're on the same page. And there's nothing that demonstrates flow that I've been able to see visually demonstrates flow better than a diagram.
Yeah. I'll do that as a listener sometimes. I'll do that as a listener sometimes too. Somebody's talking. Let me try to draw what I think you're saying, because it's hard to hold all those pieces. It's hard to hold all those pieces in your head. And the image that you have may be very different than how they're thinking about it.
And the really cool thing is then you've recorded it for posterity too. So the person who wasn't able to be in the meeting, that person is also able to find out what it was that was discussed and what the model was that was communicated in the meeting.
Yeah, well, and that gets to kind of an interesting, which is like how do you kind of translate in-person conversation. Like we're having a conversation. We're kind of having some good back and rapport, and this, that, the other. Okay, what's the process? Okay, what's the process? Now we've come to some conclusion. How do we disseminate that? How do we make sure that the shared understanding that we've arrived at continues to be the shared understanding? Now that we're tens or hundreds of people about it.
I think it actually starts earlier. I think it starts from how do you know that you have a shared understanding with the person you're meeting with. And so if it is something where the details are important, or where the model is important, or where the abstraction is important, I actually think that sometimes outlining it in a doc in the meeting is a good way to ensure that it is actually the same thing that you're talking about, that you have agreement within the meeting. Because I can't tell you how many meetings I came out of where I thought that I had the same understanding as somebody else, and then we had to have another meeting a week later because it turned out we misunderstood each other, or we meant different things, or we just didn't have the same abstraction, and we didn't break it down in the same way as each other. So I actually think it starts in the meeting, figuring out how to create artifacts that can help you during the meeting, and then those artifacts will then end up taking on a life of their own afterward by being if it's clear to both of you that you're talking about the same thing, then hopefully it becomes clear to at least many other people of what you were talking about.
What is it about the process of creating artifacts that creates that clarity?
Well, like you said, it's really hard to have a lot of ideas in your head at the same time. So that's one piece. And it's especially hard if maybe I'm weighting some idea differently from the way you're weighting an idea, or maybe I consider two things to be the same and you don't. And so when you have it in front of you and you have it let's say with bullet points or with a diagram or with something like that, it's very clear where you're drawing those separations. It's very clear what the hierarchy is that you're dealing with. And once you have that agreement on hierarchy, then that becomes the model that you're both working from.
Yeah, I like that.
And then
that.
you have this model. You have this model. Shared
understanding because you're both looking at this thing outside of your head. And you're saying, yes, I agree. And you're saying, yes, I agree. That sums up the pieces.
Yeah, I mean, that's why whiteboarding is so effective when you're in the same office as somebody else. Because you know, how many times have we been in a meeting in person and people are talking and say, hold on, let me get a marker. And then they run over to the whiteboard, and then suddenly you feel like everything is running much more smoothly at that point. Like as soon as somebody's writing on the whiteboard, suddenly you feel like you're really able to move.
Yeah. Well, and as you mentioned, Lucid Chart. I've used that as a virtual whiteboarding tool. I also love FigJam and Figma for that. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so stepping back then, another area that I wanted to talk with you about is around relationship building and relationship management. Particularly the reason I was curious on getting your perspective. When you're somewhere, as long as you were, outside of my experience. I have never been someplace more than 5 years, much less 5 years, much less 16 years. You were there. 16 years. You were there.
16.5 years.
Yeah. So I'm sure during that time, there's some challenging folks to work with for a long period. Folks where you're able to develop a relationship over the course of years and years. Think about that. How do you manage those relationships?
There are a lot of different types of relationships. There are a lot of different types of personalities, and there are a lot of different areas in which it's actually really important to to maybe focus differently, communicate differently, document differently. So when you say, maybe there are some people who are difficult or challenging to work with, one of the areas is if you see somebody who is more junior who they're focusing on, let's say, promotion, and they really want to get promoted, and they're so focused on that they are not thinking about, they're so focused on, do I own something, that they are not thinking about what does it mean to own something or what is truly important. And so in some cases, when there are more junior people, I need to sort of get them to look somewhere that they weren't previously looking, because they were looking at, let's say, the Google's big into the job ladders. So they were looking at the job ladder and it says ownership. And what they don't understand is what ownership really means is trust. So when I own something, that doesn't mean my name is on paper as the person who owns it. What it means is other people can trust that for that thing, I have it under control. And so that is one example of the kind of thing where I have to address somebody perhaps not having not approaching things in maybe the most productive way. Google also is very famous for having a lot of very technically strong-minded individuals, people who believe that their way is right, and I find that a lot of the time there's a few things. One is you have to understand what's important to them. Is it that a certain abstraction or a certain set of properties about the code or the system is important to them, like making sure that it is entirely idempotent, or it is isolated, or whatever it might be. So you have to understand kind of what is important to the person, and I think you get a sense of that over time. You can read their docs, you can see what they focus on. And then sometimes what you'll realize is they're actually really good at that. And so then you say, okay, I'm not going to get into your territory because you're really good at it, but let me just tell you what's important to me. And making sure that you're clear what is important to you. And so a lot of the time, if you express to them, it's really important that we're able to serve X, Y, and Z use cases Some of the time they'll say, I disagree, we need to serve those use cases, in which case you're having the important discussion. You're not having the, but how do we do it discussion. And in some cases, they will say, okay, I understand you need to serve that use case. Here is a way that you might be able to do that.
Because you've moved the conversation, from being their turf to how do we meet this?
Yeah, and you've also at the same time told them, this is why I care about it. Because if they don't feel like you have a stake in it, if they don't feel like you should care about it, then they're not going to care what you care about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like that applies not just to conversations with other engineers, cross-functional relationships, and all sorts of things.
Yeah, or personal relationships, yes.
Yeah.
If you're talking about what is important to do for chores around the house, is it important for them that everything is vacuumed, or is it important more important that everything is picked up? I mean, these are, you have the word clean. It could mean any of those things.
Yeah. Let's actually break down this concept. What does it mean for you? How does this? What is the bit by bit? What is the bit?
Yeah, it's a habit of mine. Can get annoying.
Well, okay, so that's another
place to dig then.
We all have habits,
which can be helpful, but also sometimes
get in our way.
How do you discover that can be annoying sometimes? That's self-awareness, right? Which is another human skill. It's challenging. How do you discover for yourself, what are the things I'm doing? What are the things I'm doing that kind of getting in my way?
Sometimes people will tell you. I'm fortunate enough to have a wife who will tell me when something is annoying to her, and so she'll say, "I'm not another engineer." So you're not at work anymore, sometimes. And not less now, which means that hopefully I've gotten the message somewhat, that I need to approach it on a more emotional level, a less logical level. Because what's annoying to one person is definitely not going to be annoying to another person. There are people who I find annoying that she totally likes talking to, and there are people she finds annoying that I like talking to. So it's an individual basis. There's also, when I'm in a meeting, if I say something and everybody immediately goes back to talking about the thing that they were talking about before I said it, that is a really strong signal to me that what I said they did not consider useful. If, however, the rest of the meeting totally changes direction, and it feels like it changes direction in a productive way, then maybe that's a signal to me that, maybe I bring a unique perspective to this.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, I there were a few things in there that I like and that dovetailed with what you were talking about before. There were a few things in there that I like and that dovetailed with what you were talking about before. And how they like kind of understanding what's important to someone, right? And how they like to be communicated talk completely logically, right? And break things down. Is it more important to talk express completely logically and break things down, or is it more important to express empathy? And that can vary by person. It can vary by situation. On more of an emotional level, even with the same people. And that can vary by person.
Yeah, I mean,
it
the
can
extreme
vary
example
by situation,
maybe is
even
on
with the same
Reddit.
people.
You'll have people who say, they say I need to be less of a jerk, but I'm just being honest. And that's because facts and how you are received and how you're communicating emotionally, those are different levels of communication, and you can definitely be telling the truth in a way that is counterproductive.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to your initial point, right? It's not just about what's being transmitted. It's about what's being received. Initial point, right? If I'm trying to give you feedback and all you hear is this guy's a jerk, he's being if I'm trying to give you feedback and all you hear is this guy's a jerk, he's picking on me, you're not going to hear any of the feedback. Because you're unkind, stuck on that level. You're not going to hear any of the feedback because there's a thing that I need to communicate on that level. How can I say that? I need to figure out in a way that you're going to hear it. That I need to communicate to you. How can I say that in a way that you're going to hear it?
Yeah, I mean, there are people who have communicated where the result of the conversation about, be talking about something I want to do, and my takeaway from the conversation is, don't tell them what I want to do.
Do you think that's what they were trying to communicate to you?
No, they were trying to.
Do you think that's what they were trying to communicate to you?
Sometimes they're trying to veto something, or they're trying to protect something, or they may have had a good point, but at some point it feels not worth it. From my side.
Yeah. Okay, I want to circle back to something from a little bit ago. You talked about people focused on promotion. And I feel like I want to circle back to something kind of a tricky topic. You talked about people focused on promotion. And I feel like a lot of folks care about it. Promotion is kind of a tricky topic. It's not necessarily clear like what is the right way to go care about it? What do you need to do? It's not necessarily clear. Like you have maybe this job ladder to look at, but as you highlight, what do you need to do? Those words may have different meaning to the job ladder to look at, but judging your performance than to the people who are those words may have different meaning to the people who are judging your performance than to the people who are looking at the ladder saying what do I do? So going through the promotion and process at Google or helping mentor folks through it, either in your experience going through the promotion and process at Google or helping mentor folks through it as you get ready to try to get promoted. How did you think about what should you be doing, approaching, thinking about as you get ready to try to get promoted?
Is that just talking about it is taboo. You're not even supposed to bring it up. You're not supposed to care about it. And even at Google, which is a very growth-oriented culture, you're not supposed to say my goal is I want to get promoted to the next level, or people might feel uncomfortable bringing it up. So the first thing is, it is really important to be able to bring it up. Now, I think being able to understand what the level means qualitatively, though, as I was talking earlier about, like, okay, yeah, you are tech lead of a project, but do people trust you with that project? Those are two different things. And ideally, you don't become tech lead until you've demonstrated you're trustworthy, but sometimes you kind of see it the other way around. You want to kind of grab for it. And so I think that is one area where it's important to be candid with people when they are trying to get promoted. But another thing, when I'm in the more senior position, and I've had people do this with me also when I was in the more junior position, a good conversation starter about promotion, and again, it comes back to making sure you're on the same page, is to say, so what are your career goals? Like, what are your goals in terms of fulfillment and growth? And sometimes it's about promotion, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just about finding some new area to build into, or some people love refactoring stuff. Like, it's just their favorite thing in the world is refactoring stuff. And so I could talk to them all the time about leadership, but if they just don't care about it, then they don't care. Not the company might require it. That might be something that you have to have an honest conversation with them about, but you can never have that conversation that their expectations are different from the company's if you don't understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay. So you have that conversation. Yeah, and they're interested in promotion for some reason. So you have that conversation. There's a lot of valid reasons, and they're interested. I think it's totally valid to say, you know what, I want to make more money. And there's a lot of valid reasons. That's taboo, also, right? I think it's totally valid. You know what? You know what? I want living in this world costs money. It's okay to say, you know what, I want to do this job for the money. You know what, like. Living in this world costs money. Or maybe it's okay to say, you know what, I want to do this job for the money, and I want to become a better leader, whatever it is. Or maybe it's they want more of a sense of accomplishment. I want to become a better leader, whatever it is. What is the process? They want to be promoted. I mean, I'm even curious about just specifically at Google. What is people all look at the Google perf process. What do you do? Oh my! I mean, we hang out with a bunch specifically at Google. It's like people all look at the Google perf process. Are dealing with perf. Oh my god! I mean, we hang out with a bunch of Googlers. It's like perf. Oh my gosh! It's perf. Rebrand. Are dealing with perf. It's grad now. Okay, now I know when I hear that, I'll put my oh my gosh, need to rebrand. Go somewhere else. It's grad now. Blinders on instead of perf. Now I know when I hear that, I'll put my oh my gosh, somebody go somewhere else. Think about and approach blinders on instead of perf process. Like, how do you recommend
for most of the time I was at Google,
think about and approach that? How do they get ready for that
process? And you sort of took the lead on your own packet for promo packets. and you write your thing, and then your peer reviewers will write their thing, and then your manager writes their thing, and then it goes to a committee, and then they decide whether to promote you or not. And so one of the ways that I always suggested that people prepare for promotion is that before they were ready, create a description of why they deserve promotion. And what they're trying to do is two things. One of them is they're trying to figure out what is their narrative, what is the story they're telling about themselves. And then the other thing that they're trying to do, which is really, really important, is to figure out what is the whole, what is not being demonstrated with what I have already. And then that is what you can focus on during that period between then and when you actually want to get promoted.
I like that. You're forcing them to actually consider what does that actually mean? What would I have to really do? Forcing them to actually consider what does that actually mean? What would I have to really do? And then identifying a path.
And
to
so
get
Google,
there.
I don't think requires them anymore, but you know, a lot of managers then will go to people and say, "Hey, you're not doing a self-review, but can you tell me what you've done?" And so. But I think it's worth doing an informal self-review. That kind of reflection is really uncomfortable, but part of it is uncomfortable because it forces you to kind of face reality. And if you don't face reality, then you're not going to know what you need to do in order to improve.
Yeah. I mean, we do retros for our projects, right? We do retros for team stuff. Why not do personal retros? What did I do?
Yeah.
I mean, we do retros for our projects, right? We do retros for team stuff. Why not do personal retros?
What did I do?
Show? What did I actually accomplish?
You can say, like, what is this org good at and what do we need to work on? And then you have an area where you say, okay, if we need to work on this, let's try this, this, and this, and let's figure out what the criteria are for success.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so I think that's a nice view into how to think about, I'm considering promotion. What should I do? I think that's a nice view into on the other side, like to think about those perf packets. Are those being reviewed by peers? Are they being reviewed by managers, more senior ICs? Like who's reviewing that? And if you're someone who's being asked to review a perf packet, more senior ICs, what does that even mean? And if you're someone who's being asked to review
reviewers were always Google's all about the levels. So
what does that even mean?
Level +2. So it was the people who, I think the theory is, you can't really know what it means to be at a certain level until you're at the level above that, because then you have sort of a bird's eye view of what that level means. And so I think that might be why, but regardless, it's not senior engineers judging people about whether they're senior engineers. It's staff engineers judging people about whether they should get promoted to senior engineers. And over time, it changed. Overall, it was, you get in the early days, it was very committee oriented. It was very the goal was very egalitarian. It was, let's have a committee of people from across the company to figure out some objective definition of what it means to be at this level, and then they'll apply it. And they may have no idea what your work is, so your job is to explain what your work is to them well enough that any individual, even if you're a front end person and they're a back-end person, or they are a data analysis code person, they need to understand why you believe you're at a certain level. And so you do need to communicate that to them, and then they're looking at it and saying, okay, how does this fit on the generic software engineer ladder? Very, very broadly.
That feels like it's hard on them, right? Of like, okay, somebody's coming in, they're telling me about their work in an area that I have zero expertise. Right? Of like, okay, and I have somebody's coming in, they're telling me about their work in an area that I have zero expertise, and I have to understand, sort of map it to how does this match my experience, this sort of levels framework, which understand. Probably have how does this match, but this sort of maybe not levels framework. Which
so you have a committee, so there's discussion about it,
but maybe not.
And but it can be very, very difficult. Like if somebody is there are some groups of engineers, and I won't name areas or groups, but there are some types of engineers that believe that they're superior to another type of engineer. Like let's say mobile developers might feel like they are superior to back-end engineers or something like that. It's not a real example, but sometimes that actually does bias them during those discussions, and that's why there's an appeals process at Google. But the engineers are engineers is sort of an artificial construct. I don't know how it works at other companies, but at Google, the idea is you can come in and work on basically any team where they need somebody at your level. And I don't know how realistic that is, and I don't know how it works at other companies, but that was the philosophy very early on. Eventually, they started moving into a org-by-org promotion process. And so it was somebody within your org who at least has some awareness of kind of the product you work on and what that does. And so people were a little bit more familiar. You didn't have to describe your terms quite as clearly. But you still had to make sure that, if I'm on search and my organization includes people on indexing and I'm on the front end, I still need to be able to explain to them what are difficult challenges, engineering challenges for the front end.
Yeah. Well, and I'd imagine as you get further along, in some ways it almost gets harder, right? It's like I navigated this complex set of
as you get
teams
further
and
along,
in some ways it almost
to
gets
get
harder,
this
right? It's like
I navigated
and led this
complex
team, and like without knowing something about those stakeholders, I don't know if those are easygoing folks
through
easy to navigate, or like without knowing something about those stakeholders, I don't know if
say no guy over here and the whatever
easy to navigate, or like
because that's
you've got the always say no guy over here and the whatever, and you had to because that's what's your staff engineer
stuff
like. A lot of your work is people wrangling.
Yeah, it's when you're trying to describe what you do for your job, you can use the example also of being at like a cocktail party or something. How do you describe your job? And you kind of want to make it seem challenging a little bit, because you don't want them to think, oh, you're just terrible at your job, like you're doing something that doesn't need to be done or something like that. You want to be able to describe your job in a way that is very both approachable and impressive. And I think it's the same thing when you're going up for a promotion. That you want to be able to describe your job in a way that why is it difficult, and what was I trying to accomplish, and also why did it have to be that difficult? You don't want somebody who overcomplicates the problem either.
Right.
Like I created a script that could be used by anybody at Google to create a new search engine or something like that. I was like, okay, but that's not what anybody needed.
Well, and I mean, you probably know, but from the outside, Google is infamous. Well, and for perf-driven development. You probably know projects from the outside that were done Google because somebody needed some level of complexity or something. Perf-driven development. Yeah. Right, of projects that were done because somebody needed some level of complexity or something.
Yeah,
like that.
Launching a server is more impressive.
So that's
than fixing a server that somebody else launched, even though the latter might be a lot harder
and often a lot better solution.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, I think we've beaten perf to death, but it is a topic that comes up a lot where people are like, "Gosh, cool. Well, I think we've beaten perf to death." I don't know what to do, but it is a topic that comes up a lot where people are like, "Gosh, I do think I don't know what to do." Some of your earlier points about don't focus on I have to own a thing. Focus on what ownership actually. Some of your earlier points about don't focus on I have to own a thing. Focus on what ownership actually. Looking back at my notes, important. Let me see. Looking back at my notes, I think we hit on all of the bullet points that I had. Anything else springing to mind to you that would be useful or interesting to talk about? Anything else springing to mind to you that would be useful or interesting to talk about?
Actually, I'm wondering, what do you hope for people to get out of listening to this podcast?
Yeah, that is a great question. So there's a few different things, but high level, from what I've seen, there's tremendous resources out there for folks for learning technical skills. Yeah, that is a great question. So there's a few different things, but high level, when you start, to becoming probably about a senior level engineer. There's tremendous resources fairly straightforward out there for folks. It's not easy necessarily. Like there's hard stuff there, but like the path, you know what you need to do. You need to keep working on your technical skills. When you start, learn about architecture. Like there's a probably about a senior level engineer, and then at some point, fairly straightforward. It's not easy. I've seen it for a lot of folks. Hard 5 to 8 there, but like years into a career, maybe you know what you need to do. You need to keep working on your technical skills, or you learn about architecture. Starting to look at staff engineering positions, and it gets a lot muddier. And a lot of folks get stuck, and I say, "Gosh, for a lot of folks, 5 to 8 things that got me here aren't into a career, keeping me moving. They're not getting me going. You're shifting to management, or you're becoming. You're starting to look like staff engineering positions, or I'm not growing, or I'm thrust in this new role, and I have no idea how to stuck. And they say, "Gosh, successful." The things that got me here aren't keeping me moving. They're not getting me going where I want to go. For helping people, I feel like I'm stagnating, or I'm not growing, or I'm thrust in this new role in an organization that has no idea how to. You have a great manager or more senior peer who can help guide you through that. I think we have a lot fewer good resources. A lot of what I'm looking to do out in the podcast, for helping coaching services I'm offering with a bunch of other stuff, is helping folks who aren't that lucky. You're in an organization that has a lot of support. You have a great manager, or be able to become successful, guide you through that. I guess you call it engineering leaders. A lot of what I'm looking to do, not just able to technically execute on a problem, coaching services I'm offering, but who are able to is helping folks who aren't that navigation of all of the challenges transition within ourselves, within our organization, be able to become successful. I guess even call it engineering leaders, customers, people who are not just able to technically execute on a problem, but who are able to do the navigation of all of the challenges within ourselves, within our organizations, and across and out, even communicating with customers, etc.
I think when I think about
go into
kind of what
being
is
an
really
engineering
important
leader
to me personally, it is being able to find empathy in everything that you do. So whether that is thinking about your audience when you are writing a document, and thinking about where they're going to be approaching it from and how they're going to be interpreting it, and whether they're going to feel like it's stepping on their toes, to thinking about your user, what are they actually going through? It's one of the reasons why at Google there was this product excellence course that I TA'd or taught or whatever for a couple of years, and a big part of that was, okay, have empathy for your user, and that starts with, where are they coming from? What is their true goal? And I think you can apply that to if your users are developers, or you can apply it to your mentees, or you can apply it to yourself too. What is my goal? And know thyself. And I think I described how I approached things recently to somebody, and it seemed to resonate as my approach to coding is coding with empathy. To try to understand and feel where other people are coming from when they are when they're using something. It shows up when you have these. There's a lot more products now where it's sort of an intro to coding or something like that, and then there's different ones for kids versus adults, intro to coding. But what they all have in common is they try to make you feel comfortable when you're getting into it, because the number one way to destroy somebody's desire to code is to make it seem really uncomfortable. And so, that's also expressing empathy for the person, having empathy for the person. And if you say, I'm not going to do something at a corporation, if they feel like you at least have empathy for them, they're going to respect your decision more than if they feel like you're just brushing them off. So I think empathy is so critical and just so important to be able to, and it's something you can practice. And I think it's really important that everybody practices it.
Yeah. Are there particular practices that you use to develop empathy, or that you recommend to folks?
Well, for one thing, I try to make sure that I preferably have a face-to-face meeting with somebody.
Are there particular practices that you use to develop empathy, or that you recommend to folks?
And it develops them as a whole person in my mind. And so for me, that's actually really important for me to be able to build empathy, I feel like if I've only met them one time, but in person, I still have this sense of their personhood, of who they are, and so it actually becomes easier because I'm able to have that in mind when I'm trying to be empathetic toward them or trying to understand where they're coming from. Email is a kind of a terrible medium for empathy, because you don't know what the tone is, and people will ascribe all of their greatest fears onto the tone of whatever was sent to them, and it becomes like this distorted, this like really distorted funhouse mirror of what they're actually receiving, and how they see themselves. So, and then I think being able to paraphrase the things that they think, or to be able to say, is X important to you? Those are also ways of developing empathy for the person, because you're able to, one of the hardest things about empathy is just to know how people are experiencing the world. It's not just about having feels when you're talking to somebody. It's about being able to accurately understand what feels they have.
All right, that's it for this Human Skills interview. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel. You can also subscribe to the Human Skills newsletter, which there's a link to right down below, to get notified of interviews like this as they come out. Take care, y'all. This is K-Ball signing out. That's great. I'm going to cut there. That was amazing. That's an amazing ending. Unless there's something else you wanted to talk about, but that was gold right there. Okay. We can always have another conversation too, but I'm going to stop the recording.